Do you have questions about your employment rights? Ask a Lawyer is here for you. Each week, experts from EmploymentLawyer.ca answer your questions. Visit cp24.com/askalawyer and watch Wednesdays at 9:30 p.m. on CP24.
Hi there, welcome once again to Ask a Lawyer. So good to have you on the show today, where we shatter myths and misconceptions about employment law. This show is incredibly important for you to stick around for the next 30 minutes. You're going to learn a ton, that much we can almost guarantee. Lior Samfiru, employment lawyer from EmploymentLawyer.ca, is here, of course, again this week. He's going to be doing all the heavy lifting. I just look good a little bit, but I'll tell you right away how to reach out to Lior and his team anytime you want. 1-888-861-4555. Ask at EmploymentLawyer.ca. There's some more contact information we'll give throughout the show, but that's at a later time. We got so much to cover in the next half hour, including all you need to know about reprisals. I talked about it last week and said it was going to come up this week. It is. It's going to be in a few minutes. What does it mean? We'll cover it off. Have no worries about that. Plus, we'll get to some phone calls from our live radio show, which we host across the country, including on News Talk 1010 Sundays at 1 p.m. Please join us for that hour. But we always start off, Lior, with the week that was. Your time to shine, pal. What do you got for us?
Well, thank you. Thank you, John. I appreciate it. Always great to be here and talk about employment law.
Yep.
Since we started doing this show, people often even stop me on the street and say, I learned something new. I understood that they have rights. I didn't appreciate the extent to which the law protects me. And that's exactly why we're here, because the law is quite generous when it comes to employment law. I tell you as an employment lawyer that you have significant rights. You have a lot of rights that you may not appreciate. And on the show, we tell you what those are. We inform you, we educate you about those rights, so that if you're facing a workplace dilemma, a policy, let's say, that your employer is implementing, and you want to know, is it legal? Can they do that? What do you do about it? Or you're being mistreated by your boss, or your job has changed, your compensation has changed, or you lost your job. You'll know what to do. You'll know what to say. And of course, if somehow what we say here is helpful but not enough, you can always reach out to me on this off air, off the show, so we can have a private chat. We'll give you phone number and email throughout the show, so stay tuned for that. But John, you know I like to start off by telling you about a case that came across my desk. Now, this has to do with another big misconception that exists in employment law. So let me break this down. I spoke with an individual that had worked for the same employer for 8 months. Had a pretty standard job, kind of a 9-to-5 job with a 45-minute lunch break in the middle, Monday to Friday. Pretty standard job. He was let go recently, and unfortunately for him, didn't get any severance. And this is where the misconception happens. His employer said, well, you're not really our employee. You're hired through a temp agency. So you're not our employee, and because you're not our employee, we don't have to pay you any severance. You're a temp guy, so because of that, we can just wish you goodbye and let you go. So it didn't seem right to him, so he called me and he wanted to understand, the fact that he is hired through a temp agency, does it change his legal rights? So let's be clear here. No, it does not. If you look like an employee and you act like an employee, you are an employee, and it does not matter if you're hired through a temp agency. A true temp employee is someone that is assigned to one company, the next day to a different company, and goes back and forth different places providing services. If you work for the same company every day for months, you are that company's employee. I don't care if you're hired through a temp agency. I don't care if the temp agency is the one actually paying you your salary. The company you work for is your employer. They owe you vacation pay, overtime pay, and of course, they owe you severance if they let you go. So you can't get around those severance obligations by calling someone a temp employee. If that's you, if you lost your job and they're saying you're a temp employee so you don't get something, wrong. Call me and I'll make sure to help you.
It's almost like the independent contractor thing. If it were that easy, everybody would be a temp. It's not legally right.
A huge misconception.
Yep.
Independent contractor. No, same thing. If you are really an employee, but you're called an independent contractor, you're an employee still and you get severance. If you are an employee and you're called a temp, again, it doesn't matter what you're called. You have rights because the law is smarter than that.
I mentioned off the top of the show, the website EmploymentLawyer.ca, easy for you to navigate. It's free and anonymous, of course. And if you go to the media tab, drop down, you'll get access to our radio shows across the country, including Sundays at 1 p.m. on News Talk 1010. We do that for an hour, get a ton of phone calls on the radio show. We like to play them back here because it educates you, right? So we'll get to our first call for the day right now.
Employed for 8.5 years for this one company. I'm 60 years old while I was a mechanic. Without any kind of warning, notice, I was called into an office. Papers were shoved in front of my face and said, "You're fired." I'm just wondering, he gave me a very small severance. I was kind of intimidated at the time when this happened, and it shocked the hell out of me. Didn't sign any paperwork at all, and I was just wondering if there's any legal aspect, take that further to see if there's any more compensation I can get out of that.
And John, employers count on the fact that when they let you go, it's a shock. You're not thinking in your right mind. You're upset. You're scared. And because of that, there's almost an assumption that you're going to sign off on it. You're not in your right mind. You're making a decision when you shouldn't be making decisions. I'm glad that this person didn't sign it. Same with you at home. If you lose your job, chances are you're not going to expect it. Chances are you're going to feel that pressure, that intimidation, and you're going to be inclined to want to sign that severance offer. Please don't. Don't ever do that, because if you sign it, even if it's in not being in the right state of mind, you're stuck. And 90% of the time, 90%, the severance that you're offered is not even close to being what you're truly owed. So let's go back to this call that we had on our show. Let's see how much severance he's actually owed, the real amount. I'm going to show you how you can find out yourself what you're owed. We're going to go to our severance calculator, which you can find at pocketemploymentlawyer.ca. Again, it's pocketemploymentlawyer.ca. We see that on the screen. Let's plug the information in and let's see what severance this person is actually owed. So he's in a technical role, been there for 8 years. We can see that he's owed, especially given the fact that he's a bit older, 14 to 16 months of severance. That is what he's owed. So if he's offered less than that, that's what we call a wrongful dismissal. Same with you. I don't care if you've worked there for a long period of time, for 6 months or 6 years or any other period of time, if you're in a senior position or a junior position. If you lost your job, you have to get that advice, and it's as easy as grabbing your smartphone and going to pocketemploymentlawyer.ca.
As mentioned, our main topic for the day is everything you need to know about reprisals. That is coming up, but we'll take a short break before we get to it. In the meantime, reaching out to Lior and the team anytime, 1-888-861-4555 and ask@employmentlawyer.ca. More Ask a Lawyer is coming up. Hang on.
Do you have questions about your employment rights? Ask a Lawyer is here for you. Each week, experts from EmploymentLawyer.ca answer your questions. Visit cp24.com/askalawyer and watch Wednesdays at 9:30 p.m. on CP24.
Hi there, welcome back. Ask a Lawyer. So good to have you on the show again this week. John Scholes, and of course, employment lawyer Lior Samfiru is here, making you smarter. You want to reach out, ask@employmentlawyer.ca. The number anytime, 1-888-861-4555. Okay, let's get into the topic of the day, Lior. Everything you need to know about reprisals. What are they? How can they affect you? We're going to get into it right now. First of all, what exactly is a reprisal in like an employment law sense, of course, right?
So the idea behind reprisal is the fact that you cannot be punished for pursuing or asking questions about your legal rights. So reprisal is simply a situation where the company tries to get back at you, to get vengeance, if you will, because you've asked questions or tried to pursue your legal rights. It's important to remember that our legal rights are meaningless unless we have a way to confidently and properly pursue them. And that's where this concept of reprisal comes up. You can ask questions. You're allowed to find out about your rights. You're allowed to demand that the law be complied with without worrying that you will be fired. It's illegal for an employer to punish you for wanting to pursue your rights. It's illegal. Think about it this way. If you were afraid that you're going to be punished for pursuing your rights, no one is going to want to pursue those rights. So what's the point of even having them? Well, that's where the law says can't do that. So anytime your employer tries to do anything to you, they've done something illegal. If all you've tried to do is pursue your rights, it's a reprisal, and there are consequences for an employer that does that.
Okay, great breakdown of what it is. Give me a few examples. What would be a reprisal in the workplace?
So an example may be a situation where maybe you didn't get paid overtime. So you're saying, well, wait a second, employer, I need you to pay me my overtime. Or your employer didn't pay your vacation pay properly, your holiday properly. All those are situations where if you ask the questions, if you demand the payment, your employer cannot do anything to you. And if they try to, that's a reprisal. They may not be happy with you, by the way, that you're demanding your rights, but it doesn't matter. The laws are there for a reason, and they have to comply with the law. Another example of a reprisal is a situation where you're complaining about the fact you're being mistreated or harassed or bullied. You have a right to seek redress, to seek help from your employer if you're being harassed, and you cannot, absolutely not, be punished, let go, or anything because of it. So an employer that, of course, doesn't deal with you properly if you've complained about harassment and instead takes it out on you is doing something illegal. It's a reprisal. So always remember that you are protected if all you're trying to do is pursue and enforce your rights.
Topic for today, again, to reiterate, is all about reprisals, what they are, how they affect you, how you can deal with it. So those are a couple great examples you give. Maybe you have one or more of those happening with you now. What do you do?
So if you believe that your employer did that to you, they didn't treat you properly, or let's take a step back. Let's say you believe you're owed overtime, vacation pay. Well, in that situation, talk to your employer. First of all, you can ask the question, employer, I'm not sure if you've calculated it appropriately. Can you show me how you've calculated my overtime, right? And they have to provide you with that information. Or if you know your employer didn't pay you properly, well, employer, you must pay me. And if your employer doesn't do that, you can go to me, I can help you. You can go to the Ministry of Labor for that, all the while knowing that your employer can't do anything. They can't punish you for doing that. They can try to show why they may not owe you that money if they feel that they don't owe you or that they did comply with their rights. But regardless of whether or not you were right, and this is the key, even if it turns out that you didn't actually have the rights that you thought that you did, the fact that you asked for them still means you cannot be punished. Regardless, just asking the question protects you. So, Ministry of Labor, you call me, you talk to your employer, you can't be punished. That's
interesting you mentioned Ministry of Labor, because so often on the show we talk about the fact that when it comes to, pursuing your severance, that's the last place you should go. You should never call the ministry. But you did mention it twice here. So how does that work when you reach out to them for a reprisal case?
If you lose your job, if it comes to losing your job and getting the compensation that you're owed as a result of that loss of job, you cannot go to the Ministry of Labor. Not now, not ever. By doing that, by going to the Ministry of Labor, you're actually giving up your rights, believe it or not. Last thing you do is to go to the Ministry of Labor if you lost your job. But you absolutely can go to the Ministry of Labor if there's overtime issues, vacation pay issues, or if it's a reprisal situation where your employer is punishing you for standing up for your rights. In that case, they can be fined by the Ministry of Labor. There can be other penalties imposed on the employer. So you can absolutely go to the Ministry of Labor, just not when you lose your job.
So for any of our viewers who are thinking, okay, this sounds exactly where I am right now, this reprisal situation, I want to reach out to Leo and get it fixed. How do I do that? What happens?
So you reach out to me, and oftentimes one letter from me gets the employer off your back or gets them to back down completely if what they're doing is illegal. You can also go to the Ministry of Labor. That takes a bit longer because they tend to be very backlogged. But whether you go through me or the Ministry of Labor, I want you to understand that it's improper. It's illegal to punish you for standing up for your rights. Those rights are there for a reason, and if your employer does anything to you, hey, let's talk about it. You could be owed full severance and more if you lose your job because of that, and additional damages. So an employer that messes with your rights in that way is going to find itself on the receiving end of a not so good legal action.
As mentioned, the EmploymentLawyer.ca website is where you want to go. That's your first line of defense when you're searching for Leo and his team. Among the other things you're going to get off that website, some contact information, all about your employment law rights, different links, different places to go. You're also going to find a link to find one of our many radio shows, which we've been doing close to 10 years across the country now, almost a decade, including News Talk 1010. That happens Sundays at 1 p.m. You guys are great. You call the show all the time. We talk to you. We play some of the calls back here, and we dissect them a little bit. Call number 2 for the day's coming up now, Leo.
Work at a call center. We're doing sales, and I'm not meeting sales targets. They keep calling me up and saying, you're not saying, let's get the credit check done. I try on most of the calls there, but a lot of the calls I have are like people calling in, they're angry because they didn't get something they were promised. At this point here, they're like, we've talked in the past, your next step is a 60-day improvement or else you're out. Do I have any recourse on that, or is it, that's it, I'm done there?
So it's not an uncommon situation where the company says you're not doing your job properly. They put you on a performance improvement plan. They give you an ultimatum and a deadline. Well, what do you do in that situation? So the first thing I want you to understand is that your employer can let you go. Even if what you did is not bad at all, even if you're a good employee, they can let you go, but they have to pay severance. The key here is that what we don't want the company to do is to let you go without severance, i.e. for cause. And the way to do that, the way to ensure that they don't do that is if there's a reason why you're not meeting those targets, or there's a reason, or there's other circumstances that you're aware of that may prevent you from doing your job properly, say so, and say so in writing. So employer, the reason why I can't get to these targets is because of the people I'm talking to or the leads I'm getting or whatever the reason is. Put that in writing. That makes it that much more difficult for the company to let you go for cause. But the other thing I want you to remember is this. Even if all else fails and you still can't meet those targets and you're not necessarily sure why that is, but you've done your best, even then, it's difficult to terminate for cause. It's a very, very high standard to let someone go for cause, which means if you lose your job, you are owed severance. Now, you can't necessarily prevent the company from letting you go, but you absolutely can ensure you get your severance. So if you lose your job, doesn't matter if it's performance reasons, doesn't matter if you were given an ultimatum, you have to call me because chances are you're still owed your full severance. By the way, that could be as much as 2 years' pay.
All right, we'll take another short break, and when we come back, what to do when your former employer offers you some options after closing down your work location. We'll get to that. In the meantime, it's 1-888-861-4555. Ask at EmploymentLawyer.ca. Or ask a lawyer is coming up. Just hang on.
Do you have questions about your employment rights? Ask a Lawyer is here for you. Each week, experts from EmploymentLawyer.ca answer your questions. Visit cp24.com/askalawyer and watch Wednesdays at 9:30 p.m. on CP24.
All right, welcome back to Ask a Lawyer. John Scholes and Lior Samfiru. EmploymentLawyer.ca is where you go, as I mentioned before, to find one of many radio shows across the country. You can tune in on a weekly basis, including News Talk 1010, Sundays at 1 p.m. Our third phone call, Lior, from the radio show is coming up right now.
Yeah, mother actually. She's 1 month away from her 35th anniversary in her career. The store she's working at right now is closing. I offered her the opportunity to go and bump into another store, or you can take this package. The packages that are being offered to senior staff today are considerably different, much different than packages that were offered to other staff who retired, let's say, a couple of years ago.
So obviously, to make a decision as to what's better, relocation or package, you have to know what is the package that you're owed. Now, remember, what someone else may have been offered, ultimately not relevant. The law determines what you're owed. So that's where we have to focus here. What is she owed after those 35 years of service? You know what I'm going to do. We're going to go back to pocketemploymentlawyer.ca, use our severance calculator tool, and let's see what this person is owed after 35 years of service. Manager, been there for 35. You see on the screen, she's owed 24 months of severance. That is what the package, quote unquote, for her looks like. If she's been offered that, she's fine. She can make a decision. If she hasn't been offered that, well, she needs to talk to her employer, or I can get involved. After all these years, John, 24 months is the right number.
I want to get to a question, Lior, that you were asked recently. Came across your desk at the firm. Goes like this. I was let go 3 months into my maternity leave. My boss said that according to the law, I don't need severance as I'm already getting employment insurance. Is that right?
Well, before we even say the word severance here, the fact that someone is let go on maternity leave, that's a huge problem because that's illegal unless there's a really, really good reason. So right off the bat, I think we have an employment standards and a human rights violation here. But beyond that, the fact that you're getting EI does not mean the company doesn't have to pay severance. Now, you may have to repay some money back to EI, but the company does not save $1 in terms of severance. And there's ways to structure the severance package so it doesn't impact your EI. So don't believe that nonsense that you don't get severance if you're on EI, and if you're let go when you're on maternity leave or parental leave, illegal, you have to call me right away.
And with that, we'll take one more short break. On the return, it's going to be how long you should wait before it can be coming back off a temporary layoff. That is on the way on Ask a Lawyer. Stand by.
Do you have questions about your employment rights? Ask a Lawyer is here for you. Each week, experts from EmploymentLawyer.ca answer your questions. Visit cp24.com/askalawyer and watch Wednesdays at 9:30 p.m. on CP24.
Welcome back. Ask a Lawyer. John Scholes, Lior Sanfiru here weekly on CP24 and live streaming as well. Sometimes he does practice law between all the TV and radio and live streaming, but if you want to participate and catch it, you could do so on YouTube as well and Facebook. stlawyers.ca is how you get on that live stream. And pay attention. Here's the question from says, after 2 years in my job, I was put on a layoff. My return to work date is to be determined. How long should I wait for an answer on that? 1 week? 1 month? What do you think?
John, especially during the pandemic, this was one of the most common questions because people all over the country were put on a temporary layoff. Maybe we'll call you back at some point. And the question I was always getting was, how long do I have to wait? When is it enough? Well, here's the answer, and I think some of our viewers may be surprised by this, is you don't have to wait at all. There is no time that you have to accept a layoff for. You can decide. The employee can choose to make the decision as to whether or not they want to accept the layoff, as to whether or not they're going to accept it at all. So if you want to wait for a week, you can do that. If you want to wait for a month, you can do that. Or if you don't want to wait at all, you make the decision. So it's not up to the employer. And if you don't want to wait, you can treat that temporary layoff as a termination, constructive dismissal, and get your full severance. There's no automatic right to lay you off temporarily. If you are laid off temporarily, you can decide. You don't have to wait for the company to decide.
All right, good stuff. Thank you so much. That is it for another show. You want to reach out to Lior anytime, 1-888-861-4555, ask@employmentlawyer.ca. And of course, you'll catch this show, Ask a Lawyer, on cp24.com/askalawyer, Wednesdays at 9:30, and our radio show as well, News Talk 1010. That is Sundays at 1 p.m. We'll catch you next time on Ask a Lawyer. Thank you so much for joining us.